Great. Welcome, everybody, to the first event of our Cultural Connections Friends of the Hannon Library speaker series. I'm Sophia Bogle. I'm the president of the Friends of Hannon Library. And for tonight's event, we invite you to blast off with Kathy Camper's Lowriders in Space, graphic novels, equity, diversity, and lowrider technology. And I'm going to be posting some links to her website and books a little bit later. Before we begin this virtual event, it's our tradition to take a moment to acknowledge our connection to this land, its history, and its present. The following is a formal land acknowledgement written by the members of the Native American Studies program here at SOU. Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon, is built on the traditional lands of the Takelma and Shasta peoples. Today, we recognize the many tribes and bands who call the Klamath Basin region their ancestral territory, and we highlight the continued sovereignty of the 9 tribes of Oregon and Northern Californian tribes who have ties to this place. We encourage you to learn more about this land, its history, and Indigenous peoples. And with that, I'm going to tell you about the Friends of Hannon Library. We are a group dedicated to enriching the offerings of the Hannon Library, from expanding the overall scope of the collection to being able to add rare volumes to the Marjorie Bailey Special Shakespeare collection. And of course, we put on this speaker series to help bring our community together. If you too believe in the awesome power of libraries to make the world a better place, please join us and become a member of the Friends of Hannon Library. And on a side note, we're looking to expand our board with another member or 2, and we would welcome your interest. And you can email me, and I'll put that in the chat as well. Coming up for the rest of this season, we have 6 more speakers. In November, we have a presentation called Keepers of the Flame, Indigenous Burning Practices and Future of Land Management. January is our beloved annual William Stafford Poetry Celebration. February brings us to our own former SOU president, Roy Saigo, with a talk called But I'm an American Citizen. And that's about the Japanese internment camp that he spent some time in as a child. March, we have Irv Lubliner on the Holocaust and his mother's writings about that. April, we have Valerie Janice talking about her YA fantasy books that she has infused with Indigenous culture. And finally, in May, we have Gigi Best with her book, Thomas the Melungeon, Walking in My Ancestors' Footsteps. And that's about her ancestry, her African ancestry that she has documented. It's very interesting. All right, before I turn this over to our speaker, I'm going to go over just a couple of technical things. This event is being recorded, and because it's a webinar rather than a normal Zoom, you're not going to be able to see yourself, all you audience out there, and you'll be muted during the presentation. The chat feature is disabled for the event, and while, let's see, okay, and we're going to have a Q&A at the end. You can put your questions into the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen there at any time, and I'll be able to ask our speaker those questions as we go along or at the very end. And let's see, I'm going to introduce you now to our speaker, Kathy Camper, who is the award-winning author of the Lowriders in Space graphic novel series and 10 Ways to Hear Snow, Bugs Before Time, and the forthcoming Lowriders to the Rescue and Arab All Year Round. She also writes zines, including Sugar Needle, and is a founding member of the Portland Women of Color Zine Collective. An Arab American and a graduate of VONA Voices Writing, Kathy is a librarian and lives in Portland, Oregon. And take it away, Kathy.
Hello, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you to you and for the Friends of Hammond Library for having me. So I am going to share my story of creating Lowriders in space with my friend and illustrator Raoul III, and talk a little bit about how graphic novels are created and some of the other books I did. So first I'm going to share my screen so that you can see what I'm talking about, because it's sort of silly to talk about a graphic novel without sharing the art. And so let me get to my screen. Here we go. And I hope everybody can see this. Is it showing up? It looks like it is. Okay, so let's start with what is a lowrider. And lowriders are cars that are customized by Latinx people. And back in the day, there was kind of a split between the Anglos that invented hot rods, which were customized cars, and Latinx folks that made lowriders. And so they're both different versions of customized cars, but hot rods were meant to go fast generally, where lowriders were meant to go low and slow. So the idea was you would cruise the neighborhood, show off your car, talk with your friends, flirt. And these are some examples of cars that I'd like to show just so you can see. The pink one is a very famous car. But if you look, there's kind of two aspects to lowriders, and one is the look, and the other is how they hip and hop. They move up and down. You'll notice at the top, there's a little baby push car. So sometimes strollers can be customized, or kids' cars like this. And in the other corner, there's a lowrider bike, which is a good example of the aesthetic, which is often over the top and super luxurious. So I just was in a talk last night about lowriders, and several people mentioned, even if you were poor and your house wasn't that great, your car could be magnificent. Also notice how there's artwork in unusual places like the hubcaps of cars. And oftentimes there'll be a placa, or like a license plate with the club's name, the car club's name on it, like in the back window or somewhere on the car. And the older car, those cars are sometimes called lead sleds. But that has something on the side of it called a swamp cooler. And that's an old school air conditioner where hot air would come through that tube and go over cool water, and that would cool the air. And so you'd get a rush of cool air as you were driving along. So I like to show this video. This is a car competition, because a lot of times people say, well, why would you want to write a book about lowriders? So I'm not going to show the whole video, but if you've never seen a lowrider hop, I want you to take a look here. And these guys on the side are controlling levers, which control hydraulics or air compression to make the tires go up and down. So they're very skilled, because they're kind of driving the direction of the car by how it hops. And you'll note that it's very loud when you go to these competitions. So we'll play this for a little bit. You'll also note that this car is not jet fitted. And that's because parts often fly off when they're bouncing like this. So you wouldn't want to sink a lot of money into the looks of a car that's going to be dancing like this. Now they have to push it back because it almost hit the audience. I think you got the gist of it, but you can see why I would think a car like that was exciting to write about, especially for kids. Now this video I'm not going to show, but this is another thing, another way they can compete with lowriders is to see how high you can get the car to bounce. And you can see here he has like a ruler so they can measure it. And now some cars get almost vertical. Back in the day it used to be pretty low, but now they build them so that they can extend from the wheels so high that they're almost completely up and down that way. So how did I come to write Lowriders? What's the story behind it? Well, instead of having me tell you, I'd like to share a little trailer that Raul and I created with friends of ours that tells about the first Lowrider book. So we love Saturday morning cartoons, and I'm going to just play this for you now. Oops, let's see, that didn't work. Let's see. Sorry to be jumping around. Okay, there we go.
Ilirio Malaria, Flapjack Octopus, and Lupe Impala like working with cars. That was their job. Lupe was the finest mechanic south of Vacaville. Flapjack wielded the wettest washcloth north of the Salton Sea, and Ilirio was the best detail artist around. From sunrise to sunset, they worked at the car dealership 6 days a week, but they wanted a garage of their own and a car, not one that would blast by fast, or one that shifted and drifted. They wanted a car that would go low and slow, bajito y suavecito. A universal car competition could make their dream come true. They had a car, one that was so low and slow, it didn't even go. With a little imagination and a lot of work, plus a box of rocket parts, they made the ride look good.
But is it special enough to win? Will it even start? Wow, I don't think we're in a barrio anymore.
So just like the lowriders in the book, Raul and I have collaborated in many ways to make things happen, and it's been a really fun journey. Let's see here if I can move to the next page. There we go. A lot of times when I present to kids, they say, how do you and Raul create your books? And the thing is, I live in Portland, Oregon on the West Coast, and Raul lives in Boston, Massachusetts. So we are literally on opposite ends of the United States. And there's 3-hour time difference besides. So when we talk or work together, we have to plan a phone call because sometimes accidentally he'll call me and I'm still asleep in the morning, or sometimes I'll call him at night and he's like, I'm going to bed, I can't talk. But this is us at work, and you'll notice I'm wearing my pajamas. And I like to tell everybody one of the benefits of being a writer is your work clothes can be your PJs. And of course, now during COVID, a lot of us have discovered that, right? We can work from home. But usually that's what we're doing. And there's Raul working at his desk drawing the pictures. So how do we write these books and create them? Well, it all starts with a manuscript. I have some pictures here. I often write notes because ideas come to me when I'm asleep, when I'm at work, when I'm walking. And the most important thing is to get the idea down, because if you forget it, then it can be a great idea, but it's gone. So I have lots of little notes, and eventually I put those all in the computer and I write up a script. And then when the script is done, I send it to my editor who looks at it. And it's sort of like when you're in school and you send a paper, you give a paper to your teacher. And when it's complete, you feel all great and all excited. And you'll note that I draw little pictures there too. Sometimes I would do that because then I could remember something to tell Raul to add in as well. So anyway, I usually feel really excited when I submit something to the editor. But then a couple weeks later or a couple months later, it comes back with the editor's comments. And this is what it looks like. So if you want to be a writer, or if you're a kid trying to write, just know that it means you have a lot of going back and forth. All those blue and red comments on the side, those are things that editors are talking to me about that need changes or need to be fixed. So a book goes through several of these drafts, back and forth and back and forth. And this isn't even, there's no pictures yet, just to get the writing perfect so that by the time Raul gets it, he'll have something to work with that's steady and that all the mistakes are out of it. These three pictures are some of the first pictures Raul ever sent me of the characters. Before we even knew we would get a book, I had sent him my really basic beginning draft, and he right away said, this is the book I wanted to read as a kid. And he sent me these pictures, and I was really excited about them. And we both liked the idea that this book could look like something that you might draw at school. So he drew it on lined paper like this, and you can see he drew it with pens, ballpoint pens, and you'll see more of that. But we really liked, both of us, the idea that kids could read it and feel like they could make art and they didn't have to be rich or go to art school. You can do really good things with just what you have around the house. Then later, this was another early style. I always called it the tie-dye style because Raul was kind of playing around more with Photoshop. So for a while, he was looking at doing it like this, but we got better reaction from the ballpoint pen drawings. So eventually, we went to these drawings. So you can see this is the three characters. Illyrio Malaria is a mosquito up at the top, and he paints the murales and the art on the cars. And Lupe Impala is a mechanic, and an impala is an African deer, so she has little horns. And she's named after the chosen lowrider car, the Chevy Impala. And Flapjack Octopus is a real octopus. I'll show you a picture of one in a little bit, but he buffs the cars out and makes them shine. So once we finish the manuscript, Raul starts to draw, and he sent me this artwork to share with you. This is a thumbnail. So before he really commits to anything, he does loose sketches of the panels. And if you think about it, 100-page book, if it has 6 panels per page, that's like 600 drawings. That's a lot of art. So he doesn't want to finalize anything. He'll just kind of lay it out like this so that the editor and art director can make sure that the story is readable and that he's showing what needs to be there. Then he'll move to this layout on the left. Those are type pencils. So now you're starting to see the definition of how it's really going to look, but it's still in pencil. And that's important because pencil can be erased. So for example, in the middle panel, if the editor wants Lupe in a different place, or you need to have a speech bubble someplace, it can still be erased and moved around. And then to the right is the inks, the more finalized art. And once you're getting to that, we have to commit to it. So they don't want so many big changes. By now, we should know what it looks like because it's getting more set, and Raul's obviously put a lot of work into it. And you'll also see here, some of the color was added here. So there's some red here also. And then this is a shot from the page, the actual page. So this is with all the color added in. So the color is like layers that are filling in around the black. And Raul also wanted the pages to look old. So he figured out a kind of wash to make with tea or coffee. And then they Photoshopped that wash in on the pages. So the pages have this kind of antiquated, older look. Influences. So part of the reason Raul did that on his pages is because we both admired Posada, who was a Mexican printmaker and engraver from 1852 to 1913. And you'll probably recognize some of his artwork. He did lots of illustrations and posters, and he's best known for his calaveras and skeletons that satirize the upper classes. And you'll especially see his work around Dia de los Muertos. There's some famous pictures that he has of skeletons all dressed in Victorian clothing, but he was an artist for the masses. He gave his artwork away. He wanted people to see it. And Raul wanted that aspect to be in our book. Let's see. We also both liked Jack Kirby. He's a famous cartoonist, and there's some drawings that Raul did that are sort of in his style, hidden within the book. And we like Jack Cole, who did Plastic Man. And you can see in this picture the fun things you can do in a cartoon because it's not real. And with Flapjack Octopus, because he's an octopus, he's bendy and stretchy. And so we like that. And it's important when you read Lowriders to realize it's not just a kid's book, it's also a comic, that a lot of what Raul and I sunk into it is from our love of comics and what comics allow you to do. Also, I should mention that Lowriders have a really close connection with fan art. Lowrider magazines have always encouraged kids and people to submit artwork and drawings. And this is a picture from Teen Angel, which is a kind of zine that was made about Lowriders, and also the idea of drawing with Bic pens and doing it yourself. So that's a huge part of the aesthetic or the look and the idea we wanted to have behind Lowriders. And both Raul and I love that we get fan art from people all over the world that draw our characters and share them with us. We also both love Mad Magazine, both the sense of humor, the wackiness, and also sort of political commentary or cultural commentary. And some people have noted that Illyrio kind of looks like Spy versus Spy because as a mosquito, he has a nose like that. But that I think was just sort of accidental. I also want to mention the Hernandez brothers, who are probably the most well-known Latinx comics creators and Love and Rockets, but they've also done some kids books like The Dragon Slayer and Marble Season. And we especially admire them for their world building and their families of characters. One thing when you create a comic like this, not only do you have characters, but you have to think carefully about where they live and what the parameters of that world are, and they did a great job of that. Also, we both loved Crazy Cat and George Harriman, and he is one of the most famous cartoonists. He was in the William Randolph Hearst newspapers, but one of the things that's awesome about him is how he portrayed the Southwest. And if you look at his abstract landscapes of like what Utah would look like, it's pretty amazing. So he's somebody else that we looked at, and also his poetic sense in creating comics. So this is an early picture Raul did, and it never showed up in any of the books, but just to kind of experiment with where our characters lived and what their world looked like. And Raul grew up in El Paso and Juarez, and so a lot of what's in the book often references his life there. Like I believe this eagle on the mountain actually exists in El Paso. So science, I love science and I love putting it in my books. how do lowriders hop? What's the story? Well, back in the day, Latinx people I mentioned just thought that it was cool to have your car really low to the ground. So initially they'd toss sandbags in the trunk. And these are some of the big old cars that they were doing that with. But the problem was police, of course, always hated that. And they would give you a ticket and measure how high your car was from the pavement. So if you had sandbags and you saw that red light in your rearview mirror, you couldn't just toss them out of your car quickly. So they had to come up with something else. And what that was hydraulics. And hydraulics are basically, you have a tube that's filled with a thick liquid, and the tube pushes the liquid, like pushes the space of that liquid so that the liquid raises up the car. It's sort of like if you're going and it's getting smaller and smaller. And so the only way it can go is to go up. And one of the interesting things is this lowriders came about right after World War II. And on the West Coast, they were decommissioning a lot of the aircraft manufacturers from the war. So you could get all kinds of airplane parts for cheap. And that's where the original lowriders got their hydraulics. And so that plays a little part in the book. Now this guy, I'm not going to show you his video, but this is a picture of what that fluid looks like. It's kind of thick and viscous. But even with that fluid, it didn't make it so you could hop your car fast. So now they use compressed air. And that's when we saw that green car hopping, that's probably what they had. So when you're doing those quick changes like that, that's what you need to do. And I put on my lab coat to show you how air would work. So when the air is low, so is your car. But if you force the air or compress it in a limited space, it will raise up your car. So imagine that something like that is working on all 4 tires. And when we saw those guys flipping the switches, what they're doing is putting air in one compressor or putting it out of another. And they have to be really smart to know how to move their car and make it go 365 degrees around. And you can customize your lowrider bikes. So oftentimes at car competitions, kids will do these bikes, but it's pretty awesome to see them riding them and to see what they've added on to their bikes. Another thing I like to mention, both male and female mosquitoes eat sugar for food, but females also need to eat blood in order to reproduce. So technically the males have bushy antennae like this to help them hear and find females. Raul didn't draw Lirio like that. But in my book, it says Lirio was the best detail artist around. People were a little afraid of Lirio Malaria. And they said with a beak like that, they thought he might bite. But he says, don't be scared. I say only lady mosquitoes bite vatos for food. So I'm also making a little reference here. Back in the day, when guys wore zoot suits like this, there was a lot of racism against them. And there was even something called the zoot suit riots, where sailors beat up guys that were wearing zoot suits. And it was a racist action. So, but here I'm sort of playing around with that by saying people were a little afraid of him, but here it's because he's a mosquito. Whoops, we missed him. So I said I'd mention flapjack octopus. This is a real flapjack octopus. They're short. They're called a flapjack because they don't have big, long tentacles. Their eyes are here, and these are like little flaps that propel them. They aren't ears. But when I saw this, I thought that's such a cute animal. I need it to be a character. Another thing we hid in the book, these are the Pleiades, and the Aztecs believed that when they looked at the sky that they were seashells. So Raul drew the Pleiades as seashells when the lowriders grabbed this constellation to become their steering wheel. So they have a steering wheel made of seashells. I also wanted to mention a couple of little things that are just details. in the book, but they're sort of important. One is the tooth on the antenna and also is on their keychain. And Raul told me in his artwork, the tooth represents knowledge, like wisdom. So that's sort of a little thing we tucked in. And also the Big Dipper is on their license plate. And why is that? Well, the Big Dipper points to the North Star. And the North Star is how both Latinx people have come north to freedom, and also for Black people that also have been involved in lowrider culture, it was a way to escape enslavement. And I really felt it was important to have their license plate be something that represented a way of freedom to so many people. Well, let's see, secrets. Does anybody know who this person is? Well, this is Cantinflas, and he is an important comedian, sort of like Charlie Chaplin. And he is, he's won an Academy Award, I believe. And he's very funny to watch because his way of being comedic is to make fun of stuffy people or bosses. So he might be the janitor and there's some stuffed shirt yelling at him, and he'll just sort of move his body in funny ways and imitate him and really make fun of that class structure that way. So Raul thought it would be cool to have the garage where they work called Cantinflas. So he put the word car in there, but here's Cantinflas up here. So there's a lot of little things like that that speak to the Latinx culture that we embedded as part of the art or in the background of the story. Also, when Raul first read this script, he said, you know, I want to put Flapjack Octopus in a bucket because he's going to need to be in water. And would it be okay if we called him El Chavo Flapjack Octopus to reference El Chavo de Ocho? And El Chavo de Ocho is a Mexican TV show where all these adults dressed up sort of as kids. And this is El Chavo de Ocho, which means the boy or the lad of the 8th ward or neighborhood. And he always wore this hat and sat in this barrel. So Flaffy is a direct reference to that. This is the hat and the bucket. And also, as I say to kids, the ocho of the 8th, well, for an octopus, he has 8 arms. So it worked out really well. Speed Racer is in the book just because we thought it would be fun, the Mach 5. Raul kind of had to change it up a little, but there it is. And one other thing I wanted to talk about, a lot of people, especially adults, still think that graphic novels is not reading, that you're cheating when you read a graphic novel. So I wanted to share this one page with you because the text here just says faster, Lupe, faster. And here's the characters going down the street. But that's not what you're going to read if you're a kid. What you're going to read is all this other stuff. Like, for example, this toad up here, it says Sapo Bell instead of Taco Bell. So Sapo means toad. And I ask kids, right here is a critique of what their food is like. There's no words, but this guy tells you it's hot. And Raul put this in here because our publisher Chronicle, this is their logo. So he slipped that in there. And there's lots of just little funny stuff like this turtle. And I love all Raul's little characters here. So when kids are reading visually, it's just as important as when they're reading words, especially now when our culture is so visual with internet and online stuff. And knowing how to critique things visually, knowing when you read something, if it's true or not, because another thing that happens is sometimes what the text says is a little different than what the pictures say. So for a child to differentiate that is really important, and it's a good skill to learn. Okay, so this is my cat Jeannie, or the cat Jeannie that belongs to the Lowriders. And kids always say, why is Jeannie in the book? And it's because my cat Jambi at the time, who was a big orange Tom, got sick and died. So I said to Raul, could they have a cat that lives at the garage? And we both love businesses that have pets and cats there. So we included Jeannie, and then the editors liked Jeannie so much they wanted him to become a full-blown character. So this is my cat Jambi, and if you're wondering why he has black dots on his nose, it's because he's a redhead, and my vet said that's his freckles. Lowriders to the Center of the Earth is the second book. And in this, Jeannie, their cat, goes missing. And so they have to take a big road trip down into the center of the earth. And they meet all kinds of skeletons and bats and demons and lots of the Mexican, I guess you'd say ghosts or monsters like La Llorona, Chupacabra. They have to battle Mictlantecuhtli, who's the Aztec god of the underworld. And I did a bunch of research, and the Aztecs believed he wore necklaces of eyeballs. And so Raul chose to draw that as a cape, because in our book, he's also a luchador, and he's wrestling here with an alligator skeleton. So if you like adventure stories or Aztec culture, the second book is great. And the third book, Lowriders Blast from the Past, is about the little Lowriders. It's a prequel about how all three of them met. So it's super cute because Raul drew them all as kids, and here's Jeannie as a kitten when they first discovered him. So you get their origin stories, the story of their family. And another thing that's an important part of the book is Illyrio growing up to be an artist. And he likes to paint murales or murals, and his dad is a salesman, and his dad collects words for him. And these words are what we call now indigenous embedded words, and they're all around us. Here are some: toucan, tomato, piranha, and they come from indigenous culture languages where there was no word in colonial culture, like in Spanish or English. And so they just adopted that word. And I noticed, I was just thinking about this when we had our introduction, and a part of the request was that we think more about where we live and the indigenous culture whose land and whole civilization we often don't know. And one of the things to think about is indigenous place names. Where I live in Portland, Multnomah is an indigenous word. Where I grew up in Wisconsin, Mississippi, Chicago, and those words had meaning, and they often described what that land was or that place was, but we don't know what that means anymore, or even which people it came from. So it's fun to take one of those words and research it and learn more about it. But anyway, he paints these murales, but there's a group of bullies, the Matamascas, and that means the fly swatters, and they come, and here they are with the fly swatter, and they ruin his art. So part of the book talks about how to deal with people that pick on you or don't understand your artwork. I also published this book last November, 10 Ways to Hear Snow, and this is from my culture. I'm Arab American, half Arab, half white, and it's about a girl who goes to visit her grandma to make grape leaves, but there's been a huge snowstorm, and her grandma's in an assisted living facility and is losing her sight. So she tries to think about ways to hear the snow instead of to see it. So here's the first page: scrape, script, scrape, script. What was that? It was Mrs. Watson's shovel digging out the sidewalk. That's one way to hear snow, Lena thought. Lena walked down the street. Snack, snack, snack. The noise was low to the ground. What was that? It was the treads of Lena's boots crunching snow into tiny waffles. 2 ways to hear snow. So she counts the ways to hear snow, and it's a sort of meditative book, but it's also a book about loving to be in nature and being surrounded by nature, and how nature fulfills all your senses. And I obviously was thinking about sound, but Kennard Pak, the illustrator, is such a gorgeous artist that your eyes will be treated also in this book. And I wanted to talk a little bit about grape leaves. I grew up making these. They have lots of names. Warak Nab is the Arab, but Yebra is Syrian. Dolma has Turkish origins, or dolmades, and they can be stuffed with all kinds of things, usually something like lamb and rice, but sometimes just rice. Sometimes they have tomatoes. Sometimes they're served hot. Sometimes they are served in kind of an oil base, and with a salad, but they're wonderful. And we grew up collecting the grape leaves from wild grapevines that grew in Wisconsin. In different places, you can't use the grape leaves like a Concord grape leaf. That's very thick and it would be too tough to eat. But it was a wonderful experience, and one that I still do. So that's the end of my talk. I'm excited to say that I have 2 books coming out next spring, Lowriders to the Rescue, in which our heroes meet a group of monarch butterflies that are trapped by wildfires. So both Raul and I felt that the environment was a serious issue and something that we wanted our heroes to have to cope with. And I know living on the West Coast, wildfires have been especially scary these past couple years. Also, most of the books had concentrated on Raul's story, but I thought I need to be in the book too. So this book, the monarch butterflies are an Arab American family. And one of the things that was really exciting to me was when I started researching, I found that Latinx culture and Arab culture had many overlaps. For example, the last names like Gonzalez and Hernandez, that easy ending comes from the Moorish Arabs that lived in Spain. And so just like Raul and I had to collaborate and work together as friends, it was so exciting to discover that our cultures also had to do that. And we had many shared things in our culture. And then in that's supposed to come out in May. And then in June, I have another picture book, Arab All Year Long. And I'm really excited for this to come out because it really speaks to my own heritage. Sausan Chalabi is also Lebanese American, and she's an amazing graphic artist and did wonderful illustrations. And it goes through the months of the year. So it has little vignettes of things that kids do that combines Arab culture with modern culture and, well, no, I'm saying that wrong. Ancient Arab culture with modern Arab culture. For example, in one of the vignettes for September, some Muslim girls are looking online at high fashion hijab and getting ideas to design costumes for a Comic-Con type event. And I think that there are lots of things, lots of stereotypes about Arabs and Muslims in the Western world. And I wanted to try to dispel that and show things that I'd either seen kids do or had read about. And so I think this will be a really fun book to share with people. So I'm done, and we have plenty of time, I think, for questions. So I'd be glad to talk or answer things if people have them.
Great, thank you. Oh my gosh, this was the most auspicious beginning to our cultural connections speaker series. I can't imagine a better start to this. Oh my gosh, everything you said was so I don't know, like thorough. You did a thorough explanation of that, but I guess I should expect nothing less from a librarian. So
Well,
there
that's,
you
yeah,
go.
behind the scenes, I should say, I just retired this past year, but I worked my whole life as a librarian. So researching things was a skill that I had, and it was a fun thing to do.
Well, I felt like you let us into all, I mean, all the secrets. Like now I can't wait. I mean, I can't wait to buy these books to read myself now. I was like, oh, my nephew has them, you know, it's like he can, but now I'm like, okay, I have to read them too now. So anyway, we do have one question waiting for you from Emily. She says, what was your process to getting published? And what would you recommend to young comic writer artist duos trying to do the same?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to say if people had writing questions, I'd be glad to answer them too, because I know people wonder about that. So the main thing that I tell people is that writing is a business. If you're going to go get published, if you want to get published mainstream, big time, it is a business. So just like if you were going to be a lawyer or a doctor, you wouldn't just come up to someone and go, well, I want to go on trial and, you know, defend somebody without getting a law degree and learning what you need to do. And the reason I say this is not because I wish it was this way, but because writing is very competitive, and it requires that you know both how to write well, the talent part, but also the business stuff. For example, how do you query a literary agent? How do you write a query letter? How do you type up your manuscript? All that stuff seems sort of like, you know, well, why should I know that? But if you send something that seems very amateur, it's going to get you kicked out of the competition right away. So my publisher Chronicle for the Lowriders book, I think 1 year or two ago, they said that they got like 11,000 applicants, like manuscripts to consider. And if you think about it, there's maybe only, say they only publish 10 new manuscripts a season, and they have 11,000 to choose from. So what you got to do is a lot of work to make sure when they see that that's what they want. So what I advise people to do is to first just put in some work, both getting your writing skills up to speed, but take classes. There's a lot of the Society of Children's Book Author and Illustrator, SCBWI, is excellent to, they have annual conferences and they have local conferences, but they'll have things where, for example, they'll invite an editor and people can submit a pitch to the editor, and the editor will be on stage and just read the pitches and give her reaction. And I guarantee, even if I went now, I would cringe, because some of the things she might say, I'd go, oh, I would have done that. Like I remember one editor going, well, here's a proposal about snakes. Sounds like a great book, but I hate snakes. I'll never do a book on snakes. So in that case, the author didn't do the research to choose editors that like snakes or reptiles. So the general process of getting published is that first you got to write something that's good enough to send out, or create something. And then you got to get that to literary agents and get a literary agent to represent you. Literary agents take 15% of what you make forever. Even if you die and they have represented your book, the check goes to them and then it goes to you. So you want it to be somebody that even if you, well, hopefully you like each other, but even if you're not best friends, somebody that's good for you. And the reason I say that is, like, you wouldn't expect your lawyer to be your best friend necessarily, but if they were a good lawyer, that's what you want, somebody that can do what you want to get done. So literary agents sometimes host, like on Twitter, they'll say we're open to reading manuscripts, but you have to go, and finding a literary agent could take you a whole year, because you need to, again, look at all these agents and find the ones that want things that you do. Like sometimes people say, Kathy, can I send, would your agent like me? And I'm like, read her description, read what she wants you to submit. She might like me, but it doesn't mean that she'll like you. You will need to find your own path that way. And again, I also recommend, and maybe because I was shy about doing this, but to go to some of these conferences, like at SCBWI, because you'll meet people, you'll meet editors and agents. And if they meet you face to face and you click, they're way more likely to consider you and get over that transom, get your script in the door. The other thing is you have to have perseverance, because I have so many rejections, I can't even tell you, even as a published author. And a lot of good people just give up, and it's very hard to have your personal work critiqued. Now, I think the person asking was asking about comics. I have not gone the mainstream comic way, like Marvel, Dark Horse, and they have a whole specific way of applying. So I've just done stuff for kids, and with kids graphic novels, everybody wants them, but a lot of editors have more or less experience. So some editors don't really know how comics work. They just want a graphic novel. So I mentioned that because I know some creators have gotten in situations where they're like, I don't know what this editor wants. So it's good to have kind of a clear sense of what you want. Also, it's hard to submit just a manuscript. They usually want a person that draws and writes themselves. So like, that's why Raul and I submitted together. But the flip side now is that in the rule of doing picture books, you do not submit artwork unless you're doing both of them. The editor chooses the illustrator. So like for 10 Ways to Hear Snow, I just submitted the manuscript. And there's good rationale between that, because that way I'm not going to get in a fight with the illustrator or have to give them any directions. But also, it was fantastic that my editor got Kennard Pak. He's really well known and very prolific. So if your editor connects you with an illustrator that gets you even more shout outs, that can be an advantage that way. And generally editors are really sensitive to who you want or to what you want. Doesn't mean they can get you the illustrator, but they'll try to get you the look you want or the feel, so that, because there's nothing worse than a book where it doesn't match. And I mean, it can happen, but ideally everybody's happy, and it makes everything richer.
Yeah. Wow. Well, another thorough answer, unsurprisingly. We don't have any other open questions at the moment. And boy, I mean, you've really just covered everything. I can't even imagine what else we're going to cover here. It's just really amazing. I love all the details, the little hidden details in your books. And yeah.
Well, I guess one thing I'd like to talk about in children's books, in case anybody else is interested, I'm not sure who's there, but also it's really an exciting time because kids' books are becoming more diverse. And I know that when I created Lowriders, one of the, like people go, well, what made you do it? And I realized part of it was anger, because as a librarian, I was an outreach librarian, and I'd go out to locations where the library would bring paperbacks to free lunch sites, and we just give them out and they could bring them back. But if they didn't, that was okay. And I didn't have any books that represented the kids I was seeing, basically. We have a handful of Lowrider books, but they were all nonfiction, and they just flew off the tables. And that's where I got the idea. And it wasn't any, it's just like, maybe I could write something, and I could see this book that would be great, but I just didn't have it in my hands. So it's been really exciting to me, because that was in 2005 when I first thought thought of it, and the changes that have happened since then. Like there's a group called We Need Diverse Books, and if you look them up online, they have really great lists if you're ever trying to find, like, I need Arab books, or I need Asian books or Chinese books or something like that, to find good books. And it's just also exciting to me that more and more younger creators are coming up, and they're being listened to instead of being discouraged. And even though, like when I pitched Lowriders, I said by 2050, a third of the population is going to be English Spanish speaking. So my idea is, if you publish this book now, you're going to have lots and lots of followers. And even then I'd get things that would say too marginal an audience. You know, that's racism. That's just racism. And so it's good to see that being broken down. But I also wanted to say part of my plan was, if I got my foot in the door, I'd bring someone else in with me, and that was Raul, because he told me later he had been taking his fine art to publishing company or children's book publishers, and they couldn't make that leap to see his art as a kid's book. So having the script and, you know, doing that got us both over that hurdle. And so I'd also encourage you, if you're a creator out there, to think about ways that you can, you know, sort of spread the love or share the love. And just like the Lowriders in the books, the three characters kind of pool their skills to create this wonderful car. You know, not one person could do it, but all three of them with their weird, unique skills do it. And Raul and I also did that with the book, and also so many friends helped. And I think that for me, one of the most gratifying things has been this huge community that has grown around that. Like, I actually got to sit in a lowrider because of it. And I have had people come up to me, like adults with tears in their eyes, saying, "This is my story. How did you do this?" So when your daydream becomes something like that, it's pretty amazing. And I'm also excited to hear from a lot of teachers that it's been kind of a gateway book for kids, especially boys. And as a librarian, I know that it's important that we have strong books for girls, but I was starting to see a lot of boys dropping out of the conversation because they just didn't see themselves in books. And so while Lowriders is definitely feminist, and there's women lowriders in all the books, but I also have been very moved that some teachers have told me that they started reading because of these books, or that it opened a door. And also for Latinx kids, that it made them heroes in classrooms where before they felt intimidated or scared.
Wow. I just love how you saw a need, you saw a gap. It's like, that's the best way to write a book, I think, is you write the book that you wish existed.
Right. And I think Raul also did outreach. He did art outreach where he was teaching kids to draw and stuff. So both of us had that, where we were talking to parents and kids. I also done some outreach to kids that are incarcerated. So a lot of the things in the book, I was thinking about, if kids don't have a trusted adult, like kids that are in lockdown, they can't even get on the internet. So the idea of having a glossary in the back of the book, I mean, the Spanish is there, but the car terms, the outer space terms, because it empowers them. They can look things up. And also those are skills that kids need to learn. You know, we take it for granted that we just, look it up in a dictionary. But how does a dictionary work? And I've had kids come up to me after the talk and going, "I love the glossary. I read the whole thing." So there's also those glossary nerds out there that just like information.
Yeah. Oh, that's so wonderful. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you for writing these books.
Well, thank you for having me. And I hope that people will look them up. They're available everywhere. And keep in touch. My website has stuff, and I'm on Facebook, and there's going to be a lot of adventures because the 4th book comes out in May. So I'm going out and doing talks. Also, just one quick thing I'll say is you don't have to read all the books in order. I hate series like that, where if you haven't read the first one, throw out all the rest of them. So you can read them in any order. They're each their own separate story.
That's really great. Because it's like somebody takes out volume 1 and then you're like, oh, now I have to wait for that one to come in.
Exactly.
No,
if you work in a library, you know that's like, and I don't like series like that either. I'm like, wow, I'm never going to read that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. And I'm just going to remind people that there will be, I believe, a brief survey after this to fill out. And we hope you will all fill that out. And thank you all for coming. We hope to see you at the Hannon Library, which is now open to all with proof of vaccination.
Yay!
And so come on down and take out a book. And I don't know if these, well, it's a university library. I don't know that these books are there, but maybe they should be. So all right. Well, thank you. And I'll let everybody go. This is it for a wonderful night. And come to the next speaker event next month. And we hope to see you there.
Am I okay to just close out now, or?
I think you